I adore Republic City. It is a thrilling, exhilarating location and one of the greatest inventions of the Legend of Korra, a show I deeply love and respect. It is also a deeply misunderstood location, and I think it is important to clear up some misconceptions that people have about Republic City before I fully am able to communicate why I adore it as much as I do. The most common criticism I hear of Republic City is that it's just New York. Sometimes I even hear this criticism couched in quote-unquote progressive terms, along the lines of, oh, Avatar was based in real East Asian folklore and history, and The Legend of Korra is completely westernized it, which is a very narrow-minded criticism, I think. First off, Avatar has a lot of things that are just very Western, that are not inspired by East Asia in any conceivable way, that are just comic versions of typical American stereotypes like hippies, or even less excusably, rednecks in the swamp. As importantly, Avatar, as deeply couched in East Asian mythology and philosophy as it is, still very much remains an American show, and it doesn't pretend to be otherwise. Konietzko and DiMartino are very clear about this. They say that they made the show out of a deep and abiding love for anime and East Asian culture, but that it is a show made from a Western American 21st century perspective, as it inevitably is. But also, I'm not really sure I agree that Korra is more Western. That is, unless you see everything indicative of industrial modernity as Western, which is its own problem, I will say. Yes, Republic City does have a lot of influences from New York. As someone who lived in New York throughout undergrad, I am extremely familiar with the city. And yes, Republic City is in a lot of ways based on New York and Manhattan specifically. When we see a map of Republic City, it looks almost exactly like Manhattan externally. And there are a few elements that are very specifically American, such as the sports announcer, who is based very overtly off an American sports announcer. But I also believe that there are a lot of elements of Republic City that are rather mistakenly viewed solely as American and solely as New York. For instance, the fact that the city is a melting pot, as we say, a place where different cultures come together and create something new, create a different kind of urban environment that is distinct from any of the cultures that make it up, even as it reflects influences from those cultures. To the extent that Republic City is based on New York, it's because of that. It's because this is a place that is a confluence of the four nations. New York is that in the American context. But it's not the only place where that kind of cultural intermixture happens. as much as it's based on New York, Republic City is also very much based on Hong Kong, which is also a multicultural city, also a major financial, business, and artistic capital forged through the confluence and the intermixture of different cultures, of people coming together from different parts of the world, from different backgrounds, to speak different languages and dialects, and ultimately creating something new and distinct. In fact, the geography of Republic City draws a bit from Hong Kong as well. New York does not have those mountains. Trust me, I've lived there. I would love if New York had those towering mountains, but it doesn't. Hong Kong does. Hong Kong is much more mountainous. But more importantly, from a historical perspective, Republic City is very close to Hong Kong. Hong Kong was colonized by the British. It was a piece of China that was taken and turned into a trading port, and it grew and it prospered into something far beyond an economic arrangement. It transformed into a vibrant cultural hub for all kinds of interaction and interchange, a hotbed of food and art and literature and music. It's distinctly modern, and it also changed and grew extremely quickly. Another criticism I see made far too often of Republic City is the idea that the world couldn't possibly have evolved that fast during only 70 years, which is very misguided. Speaking as someone who is an expert in 19th century history and is currently in the process of pursuing post-grad work on 19th century literature, let me tell you that, yes, it did change that fast. It changed far more quickly than our relatively stagnant 21st century society can comprehend. People talk about how quickly the pace of technological and social, political change happens these days, but it's actually quite slow compared to what one saw in the 19th century. Hong Kong is an important reference point for Republic City because it too grew from a small port to a immense towering metropolis within less than 100 years, based largely on multiculturalism, on the interaction of people from different parts of the world sharing ideas. There are also influences in Republic City that are neither New York nor Hong Kong. Republic City does have its own Eiffel Tower, which is not just beautiful, though it is that, but it's also very much a symbol of modernity, which is fitting since that is what Republic City is to this world. It is the birth of the new, the birth of something fundamentally modern, fundamentally distinct from the rigid boundaries and binaries of the past. The Eiffel Tower was scorned when it was built as a kind of monstrosity, as this colossus of metal towering over the beautiful, picturesque city of Paris. But people grew to love it because it was beautiful, because it was well built, because it was done with creativity and artfulness. It became a symbol for the city and a symbol for a new world. So I think its inclusion is relevant here and not simply an attempt to have an Eiffel Tower just for the sake of it, although it is quite beautiful. As interestingly, the main arena calls attention to a lot of things. For instance, first thing it called attention to in my mind was Beaux Arts architecture of the late 19th and early 20th century. The iron and glass, the intricate designs, so elaborate and ornate, combined with this pursuit of complete freedom from prior architectural traditions. Again, valorization of the new, the valorization of bringing in a new art form, a new way of thinking into being. And yet, there's also another very important reference point here, which is the Golden Temple of Sikhism, a major religion of India. It is a sacred holy site of a completely different culture that is neither American nor East Asian, but is implemented here extremely well. It has a place in this world of intermixing, this world of everyone coming together, because it is an inclusive kind of world, not in the dreary, rather reductive way that inclusivity is often used nowadays, but in an exciting, free-flowing way. We have people just coming in from everywhere and sharing their passions and interests, and something new is created. Cultures come together and intermingle and fuse in a lot of ways, and the result is beautiful and unexpected. A lot of the architecture in Republic City, even the normal buildings, looks very similar to what you would see in Hong Kong at the time, or even what you would see in a city like Shanghai, another place that was extremely cosmopolitan and multicultural in the early 20th century when Korra is set. Saying that it's just New York is, I think, rather reductive and a superficial way of looking at an exciting place that is very relevant to the basic vision of the Legend of Korra, which is a fundamentally modern vision, arguably modernist in the early 20th century kind of way. The conception of what happens in a fragmented world, what happens in a deracinated society that can no longer draw from the lessons and the wisdom of the past, or at least can no longer do so in an untroubled and altogether coherent way. The world has changed so much. There is no one predestined, preformed answer for fixing the world, for restoring order to it. The question of balance and harmony in this world is less about defeating one great evil villain and more about attempting to navigate different parties, different factions, different interests in a world no longer bound to old certainties and old dichotomies. It's a much more difficult challenge, I think, for Korra than it is for Aang. Not more challenging in the straightforward idea of, oh, there's more deathly peril involved, but on an intellectual and philosophical level, it's more difficult. I think it's important that Korra's team avatar features Mako and Bolin, two brothers who grew up poor, from a mixed family. Their mother was from the Fire Nation, their father was from the Earth Kingdom. These are two people who would not have met 200 years ago. There wouldn't have been the opportunity for them to. But here they can. They can come together, fall in love, and have kids who, yes, have a hard life. They lost their parents. Korra does not sugarcoat things. But because they are right there in Republic City, they have the opportunity to meet the Avatar, and because of that, their entire life changes. They are, from that point forward, more or less masters of their own fate. They have control over what direction their lives take. And that is ultimately what a place like Republic City is about. It is what cities are about at their best. I don't want to proselytize to you about how great urban environments are, but I do want to say that cities allow people of different backgrounds to be brought together, to meet and interact in ways that were not possible in a time when the vast majority of people still lived isolated in their own little towns and villages. Even the old cities of this world, like Ba Sing Se, which is this world's equivalent of Beijing, is falling into this sense of malaise and languor. There's no energy, there's no vitality to it, there's no opportunity for people. Like China in this time period, and like Beijing specifically, the city is extremely overpopulated. The population is greatly increasing, and yet the country is not getting richer. It's not industrializing. It's stuck in this state of paralyzed, sickly enervation, and still answers to a monarchy whose legitimacy is greatly dissipating, and yet there is no clear vision of how to replace it. Republic City is the exact opposite. It's a place of constant dynamism and constant flux. People continue to flood into the city from all parts of the world and bring to it new ideas, new life, new passions. It's a city of opportunity. It's a city where someone like Makon Bolin's father can come and seek a better life. It's a vision that in America, yes, we do primarily associate, at least in this time period, with New York. But it's not only an American thing, certainly not only a New York thing. It's a beacon of modernity. It's a beacon of change and modern progress. Also, I want to point out that the triads in The Legend of Korra are fundamentally based off actual triads. That's the name that was given to Chinese gangs during this period, which is a very cool and clever reference that I have not seen paid enough attention to. Perhaps often because people just think of Republic City as being New York and do not understand how deeply immersed it is in the cultural and urban environments of East Asia during this time. These places too were places of flux and transformation and opportunity, where people came from humble backgrounds to this uncertain but exciting environment to seek a better life for themselves. And Korra understands that that's complicated and messy in a lot of ways, but that, like a lot of things in modernity compared to the distant past, it's ultimately worth celebrating. Take care. Adios, comrades.